be talking now about reverse grids in qualifying, at least. This idea has been floated around over the last week or two, and it would take place in the 2020 season. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. It looks like Mercedes are not going to comply, and potentially another team as well. And they would need 10 of 10 teams to say yes to this for it to go ahead. In terms of reverse grid qualifying, Sam, do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it should happen?
Oh, it's a debate for the ages, isn't it? The amount of times that we've seen this conversation possibly come up. I don't love the way that Formula One were trying to bring it in this time around. I absolutely love the format that Formula 2 have. I genuinely think that is a really fun, interesting, yet still rewarding format for the drivers and for the teams. You know, you come first, you start 8th. If you finish 8th, you start first. I really enjoy that format. Reverse grids, the way they've explained it seems confusing. They don't seem particularly clear themselves on how they portray it to the audience. A lot of people on social media are getting a little bit confused as to how it would work. And let's just spell it out here, because I may be getting it wrong. The short race, the sprint race, is then the qualifying. The finish is then the qualifying in reverse for the main race.
So it's the sprint qualifying race, isn't it? Where they start in reverse championship order, and the result of that race decides the starting grid for the Sunday race.
Yeah, so I can see issues, right? Qualifying works. We've said this time and time again. Qualifying is exciting, and it's not Mercedes' fault. It's not Red Bull's fault. It's not Racing Point's fault that the cars aren't equal. That's how the regulations are made, and that's the budgets at the moment. And we hopefully will see a shift of that in 2022 when the aerodynamics and drag change and the tyres come in that are different and the budget is brought down. We should see a much closer grid, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, 9 cars turned up, realising that they can have a better chance of winning, and they all brought a car to a car fight, and Mercedes brought a massive veto to their car fight, and they kind of looked everyone else in the eye and went, "Ha! We've got you here, lads." And honestly, that's the bit I'm more annoyed at. I am more annoyed that in a global sport, a team has such an ability to shift where the rules go to. I don't know if that is similar in a single sport around the world. If a governing body wants to change a rule, they get a vote within the governing body and they change the rule. You wouldn't ask Man United if they suddenly had to pay 9 out of their 11 players only 10 grand a week and they had to choose which ones to keep above that. They go, "No, thank you." And then that wouldn't happen. So why are they doing the same in Formula 1? This needs to stop. This rule base needs to stop. And that's what I'm more frustrated about. If Liberty wanted to change the rules and have a different qualifying session for this odd season that we're going to have, who am I to say no or yes? That should be their choice. And if it makes exciting racing, which I'm not yet to see, so I can't tell if it's exciting or not, let it happen. We had the stupid elimination qualifying. That was a much worse idea, and that went ahead. So give it a crack for all I care. If it's fun, then bloody brilliant. If it's not, never do it again. That's all I can say on the matter. I'm always up for experimentation. If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, but then again, with qualifying, don't try to fix something that isn't broken.
But elimination qualifying was great.
I will eliminate you from late braking in a minute.
Not quite sure.
I love to see drivers not setting lap times.
That's the
even though they're on a lap already, but they haven't made it to the line on their current lap.
Yeah. That is. Look, it's all I want from my Formula One. That's all I want.
I think we can all agree, whether we like this idea or not, it is not as bad as that. Good.
I mean, yeah. There are some really bad ideas, and that's one of them.
Well, in terms of the idea we have on the tables, Harry, what do you think about it?
Look, Ben, I know you're going to make the same point as well, and Sam's already alluded to it. Mercedes, well, no team should be able to veto. If I had it my way and I was running F1, you'd just tell the people, these are the rules. If you don't like it, then go home. This is F1, and these are the rules. But I mean, I understand that's not potentially viable. But even if teams had the vote, it shouldn't even have to be unanimous. If one says no, you should still have 9 teams that say yes. That should be enough to still do it. So it's completely barking mad. So that's just stupid. And this, I think it's a shame, and I agree, qualifying isn't broken. I like quality. There's nothing wrong with it. It's exciting, builds up to the climax every time at the end of Q3, and it's edge of the seat stuff normally. So don't agree that it needs to be fixed because it's not broken. But in these very strange, weird times we live in, where the first race of 2020 hasn't happened yet, and it's been over half a year since the last race. This was, and where we've got 2 races at the same place. This was the perfect opportunity to try it out. This was the time when we had back-to-back races at the same circuit, and I don't fault Liberty for trying to bring this in because I think it was worth a punt. Absolutely, and I think it could have made exciting races. At least, even if the result ended up the same and Hamilton still ended up on pole, how exciting would that be to see him start from the back and race all the way to the front and take the win or pole position on the final lap of the sprint race. So I think it could have made some very interesting second GP of the week, but not to be, I'm afraid. But yeah, for God's sakes, change the veto rules because it's garbage.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more on the veto rule, and I'll get onto that in a bit. Firstly, the actual idea of reverse grid qualifying. I completely agree that 2020 is the time where experimentation is needed. You know, F1 needs to keep evolving. It needs to be dynamic. It needs to lead motorsport. And, you know, it needs to change. I understand that. F1 is not like other sports where you can keep the rules relatively same for about, 25, 30 years. You don't need to change much around. I understand that F1 evolves much quicker than that. And yes, I think 2020 is the time to experiment. So I won't have a massive problem if they do decide if it does end up happening. And for the record as well, a lot of people are against this because it's not in the DNA of Formula One, which is the single worst argument in F1 history.
Oh God, I hate it.
It's so bad. And I don't agree with that whatsoever. Having said all of that, I am not a fan of this. It's just that's not the reason why. And a lot of people will be saying, give it a chance. The racing could be amazing. It could be. There's a very good chance it will be. I don't think I agree with the Mercedes coming from the back, going on to win, being exciting. I don't personally find Mercedes overtaking cars that are 100 times worse than it all that exciting. I'm not saying it's completely dull, but I'm on the fence on whether it would create amazing racing or not. But to be honest, that's superfluous. That doesn't matter because it could produce the most amazing racing we've ever seen, and I will still be against this because I cannot get behind the principle. And it doesn't matter if the race is really exciting because it still goes against that principle, and that is you can't reward poor performance. I just don't think it should happen. And if you perform not very well at a race and you get an advantage in a qualifying race, I can't get behind that idea. And there is such an advantage for the top few teams, like such an advantage right now. And hopefully that will be sorted out at least somewhat by this cost cap. But this, and I think Lewis Hamilton has said something similar on this actually, this is just dancing around the issue. This is dancing around the issue in F1, and that is the disparity between the top teams and the worst teams. It comes from the DRS school of thinking, of essentially it being a bandage. It's just, well, we have a problem, we're not actually going to solve it, but we'll work with the problem to make it slightly less of a problem. I don't think that's the way that it should be attacked. I understand the cost cap is a few years away, so I don't mind if this sort of qualifying or other qualifying formats are trialled over the next, in 2020. But once that cost cap comes in and the new regulations come in, I don't see any reason for this. It should just be 10 teams going at it, trying to get as many points as possible. And, if you sink, you sink, and if you swim, you swim. That's how it should be. That's my views on it. In terms of the veto, I couldn't agree more as well. I think the majority rule should definitely be more preferable to the one team doesn't like it doesn't happen rule, and it has there's a real possibility this spirals out of control for Formula One. But at the moment, the Formula One teams have way too much power. In that there's only 10 of them to start off with, so they know that if one of those teams leaves the grid, they're starting to get to a number where you don't want 18 drivers on the grid, you don't want 16 drivers on the grid. So they know they have power in that respect, and they know that the barriers of entry are pretty difficult to contend with. It's a lot of money to get into Formula One. Due to how the prize money works at the moment, you don't see a lot of return on investment early in terms of entering F1. So they know, these F1 teams, they've got a fair amount of power. And what a surprise, they end up using it like Mercedes are doing here. It's a vicious circle. If you give the power of rule making to these teams, they will make the rules to benefit themselves and not the sport. And if you don't make rules that benefit the sport, teams aren't going to want to enter, giving more power to the teams that are already there, meaning they get even more rule-making responsibility. And it just goes round and round and round, and it's not going to benefit them in the long term. So I'm completely against the veto. In terms of reverse grid, if it happens, so be it, but I'm not for it.